Welcome to the first episode of our book club. And if you're new here, hi, my name is Jaclyn, and here at Color Me Well, topics around mental health and diversity collide. Today's book that we will be reviewing is called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. Brené Brown describes herself in 3 words: researcher, storyteller, Texan. She's currently a research professor at the University of Houston, and for the past 2 decades, Brené has been studying the following topics: vulnerability, courage, shame, and empathy. She's also had 5 best-selling books, including the one we are reviewing today. To describe this book, it basically talks about how to let go of the person you thought you were to embrace the person you really are while living a wholehearted life. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the first episode of Book Club here on Color Me Well. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Color Me Well. My name is Jackie.
And I'm Denise.
And I think all of you have seen the announcement, but we have started to create a little book club, which we are very excited about. Denise and I both very much love to read, and I've been looking to get back into it for a while, so this has really helped. So thank you, Denise, for sparking the idea. And right now, we decided to discuss the first book that we have read. And I'm going to flash it on the screen because I have it in front of me here, but it's called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. And I figured this book would be the perfect starter book for our little book club, mainly because it's a book that is very easy, very quick in the sense that it's a short read, but also I really love this book because a lot of the materials that I usually like to read are all around the topics that Brené Brown talks about, which is vulnerability and looking at shame. And I love her books because I feel like you can pick them up and reread them over and over again and learn something new every single time. Denise, when you read the book, since it was your first time, what was your first impression of this book?
So overall, I did like the book. When I read it throughout, I felt that I picked up a lot of concepts that really resonated with me and that I feel is useful, to your point, useful for everyday life. But I do have a confession. And that is when the first half of the book, I struggled a little bit reading that part. And I feel the reason I struggled a little bit reading the first half was because it was full of her of anecdotes and how she shared about her life and shared about her vulnerabilities. And I guess when I first picked it up and when I first read about Brené, and full disclosure, I had until you mentioned her to me, Jaclyn, I didn't really know much about her. So I kind of came in with a certain expectation of this book being a little bit on the talking more about kind of the details of her research. And so when I was reading through her life stories for the first half, the entire time I was thinking, well, where's your research? Where's the numbers? And funnily enough, at the end of the book, she does address this and about her research methodology, her qualitative method of researching the topics that she goes into. So after I read the final chapter, I finally thought, okay, you know what? I appreciate this book a bit better now. So for anyone who tends to be like me and who's trying to look for like case, details on case studies whenever they read something that's psychology related, just a heads up, you might appreciate the book a little bit more if you start with the last chapter first and then go back and read everything, because I feel like had I done that, I would have put her stories into context. in terms of what I'm reading. How about you? Because this is the second time, Jackie, that you've read this book. Essentially, I'm really curious what your first impression was, and now that it's your second, run through, has that changed? Because you said it's something that you would pick up over and over again. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think the first time that I read this book, I was coming from a place of trying to figure out what my journey was going to be, living that authentic, shame, embracing, like kind of lifestyle. Like, but I also was thinking in a way where everything needed to be laid out on the table, like something like being authentic and being so forward about all of your personal shame stories. Like it just feels like it's so overloaded. And I think what I forget sometimes with Brené Brown is what she's trying to say is it's not about, old stories and trying to embrace those. It's just about how you're living day to day. So right now, that's more what I'm trying to practice. And I feel like now coming back to this book again, I'm actually understanding her concepts a lot better. And that's because I've started to really apply them in my day to day without realizing, oh yeah, I've actually read all this stuff before. So it's been really helpful to take a look at it again and to realize, okay, you know what, like I'm starting to this journey, I'm starting to do it, but this has actually helped me to be able to revisit where I could do better or be better, and but at the same time recognizing that it's still a process, which I think her book just it embraces wholeheartedly. Like I really I love how I'm using that, but it does try really hard to tell you, this is a great way to, to lead your life, but at the same time being very forgiving of yourself, self-compassionate to yourself, and remembering that you're imperfect and that's okay. So that's where I got with that book, because yeah, like I think it's just, and it's also perfect timing because being in a pandemic, I think that's all I can think about too. So it's really put focus onto where I am right now, and it's really helping me to realize like how I can start applying this and going forward as well. So going with that, what parts of the book did you feel were applicable to you?
I definitely feel like, especially with our channel, one of the parts that felt very relevant to me and is applicable to my day-to-day life right now is the section where she talks about authenticity, and she talks about how choosing authenticity, it's essentially equal to having the courage to be imperfect. And I felt that right away when I read that line, or maybe it wasn't verbatim, but when I read that section, it made me think of that I'm trying to really practice to just do things, and not to be too caught up on making things the 100% perfect as they should be, whether it's a product of what I'm doing or perhaps even how I present myself. So that really resonated with me because obviously with our channel, that's essentially what we're doing, is just presenting our imperfect selves. And I thought, right away that hit me. How about you?
So I would say applicability, and for me would be the whole concept of trading authenticity for safety may actually cause you to experience, the following: anxiety, depression, blame, rage, resentment. Like that really resonated from our last video that we did all around mental health conversations. So it's really about being able to be your authentic self, and not have that fear of holding back for whatever reason, especially for imperfection's sake. And in the end, it's you do all of those things, or if you like bottle everything up, like same thing happens again. It could be this big explosion of just verbal vomit, or just even just behavior that can be destructible for yourself. Mm-hmm. So I really thought that that was something that really applied, in the sense that I do feel like we're trying to bring out those authentic selves of ours, but also being able to recognize, okay, where did what is the root of us being like holding us back? What are those boundaries, right? So I really thought that that was a very applicable point as well.
Truthfully, like a huge chunk of the book really does talk about vulnerability and authenticity. I also wanted to point out another thing that I felt like very applicable as well, and at least for me, and it has to do with people tend to cope with their anxiety in one of two ways, and they can be either over functioning or under functioning. People who over function are seen as achievers and they get praised. And, you know, obviously in a meritocratic society, that's always great to receive praise for the work that you do. But it's good to remember, because we generally don't realize the mental health impacts of having those coping mechanisms. We tend to associate the under functioning of anxiety with laziness and negative traits like that, which at the end of the day, it truly just isn't true. It's both of those behaviors are coping mechanisms trying to address similar situations or similar emotions. So when I reread that in Brené's book, I thought, hey, it's so great that she mentioned this in that chapter, because, it's one of those things that don't get talked about enough. And I think it's really important that as a society, we recognize that both behaviors are actually negative coping behaviors, if not done in moderation.
Right. So yeah, I was definitely going to say that that's a very interesting and true point in terms of how that applies, especially in the workforce. And I'm also even just thinking about another applicable point that I kind of took as well from it. I don't think we've mentioned it yet on our channel, but even just the whole notion of leaning into joy. I feel like something that I tend to struggle with is leaning into like moments of gratitude and being able to kind of just take things like day by day, and like just looking at those like key moments and key significant parts of my life that are really bringing me some good. And instead of being the type to, I'm always kind of like going on downward spirals of all the things that are going wrong. But I feel like leaning into the joy and gratitude of life is really, really a beautiful thing. And she has this really amazing sort of like image of what joy is. And she compares joy to twinkly lights and how it just makes up all of the little parts of like, or the good parts of our life. For me, I really admired that. I think I've admired it even from the first time around that I read this book, the whole lean into joy. I've actually wanted to get a tattoo on my back that would say lean into joy, because I feel like that's something that I forget to do. So that being said, what is a personal takeaway that you think you would like to carry on with from this book?
Yeah, I actually find it interesting that you talked about leaning into joy and how you tend how it's for you it was easy. It's easy to forget the importance of doing that, because my personal takeaway from this book is about mindfulness, and she talked about how being mindful is really about having a balanced approach in life. And it's being mindful of all of your emotions, negative and positive. And I think it's really important, especially for me right now, because I am going through that journey of being more in touch with my emotions. And Brené really emphasized the importance of mindfulness, in the sense that do your best not to over identify with just one type of emotion or with just one aspect of your life, because at the end of the day, you are a full being, and you have a full scale of emotions that you feel on the day to day. And just really remind yourself that as you go through life, be mindful, be present, and feel everything. How about you?
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm really looking at the fact that she really wants to encourage people to put play back into their life. I think being in a pandemic now, especially, we have all this pressure to thrive. And that means looking at our list of things to do, or, you know, going into work and being able to like accomplish all of our like goals for the day or for the week or for the month. And then thinking that all of these things are what's going to bring us purpose, but and also give us like a little bit more to strive for. But in reality, I really loved what she was trying to say about play and how it's so important to continue to do that. It's not something that has a matter of substance to bring. It's more about us just being able to take the time to do something for ourselves. What I really thought resonated with me, especially in this chapter, was that she had mentioned this quote that the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. So it's really interesting to think about it from that perspective, because I always kind of thought like, yeah, like it's basically about you do your job, you do things around the house, and then like it's like kind of like that 180, like complete 180 going into the play part of it. But in reality, it's just about taking some time to do things that you really enjoy, and just reading a book. It could be playing a video game, and not looking at a video game as being a waste of time, because I used to think video games were a waste of time, but they're actually really fun, and it's just nice to escape for a little bit. And opening a fantasy book and being able to read about your favorite characters for an hour. And I think sometimes we take those like fun little escapes for granted, and then when we don't do them, we just end up feeling guilty. And then when we go to work and we come back, or when we do stuff around the house, we still end up feeling guilty because we're not doing anything. So I think sometimes just having that little bit of a release really will help going forward. But that was my takeaway. So in terms of your rating of the book, Denise, what do you rate this book?
All right, so out of 10, and again, I'm just going to bring this back with, had I read the final chapter first, I probably would have felt differently. And so in particular to that, I would have to, you know, for myself, give the book a 7 out of 10. Again, it's because of it just kind of, I walked into it having a completely different expectation. And maybe if I reread it, I might have a different rating overall, but for now, I'd rate it a 7 out of 10.
So yeah, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. And the reason is because, like I said, I do feel like this book, you can revisit it over and over again. So probably the first time I maybe didn't approach it like with that same sort of review. I think like I read it, it did resonate with me a little bit. And now that I've reread it, I'm really like starting to become more embracive of a lot of the topics that she's been discussing. I also feel like it's a good foundation book if you're looking to start any personal development. A lot of the chapters are just really concise and really easy to grasp in terms of, you know, very simplistic examples, and it'll definitely open the door to other topics that you can explore, whether it's from Brené Brown herself or from other authors who are discussing similar topics. And she does make some really great references to some in the book already. So sure. I feel like it does deserve an 8.5, and I'm sure like if you read it again, you'll probably pick up more things that will make it very enjoyable for you.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Book Club. Have you read The Gifts of Imperfection? And if so, did you agree with any of our reviews today? Please comment below and let us know your thoughts. And also let us know if there is a book that you feel would resonate well with this channel. We are more than happy to take all of your suggestions into consideration. Thank you so much, and join us next time.